Hello, 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 hello. It's good to see you. Say hello.
Welcome to the Huskies Hockey Podcast. Weldy and Andrew sitting here with a special guest, Jake Baskin. We're getting ahead with World Juniors. We got the World Juniors coming up. The roster, Team USA, has been released. So I was racking my brain. I was trying to think of who we can get on the show, and turns out that the guy I know perfect for the job, aficionado and Rain Man when it comes to past rosters, Jake has been gracious enough to join us. Jake, welcome to the show.
Good to be back here. I tried to listen to the last episode I was on back around NHL draft time in 2017, but
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
that episode no longer is available.
It is lost to the sands of time, and an old computer which no longer worked. Long story, but we're glad to have you back.
Yeah,
Well, it was a memorable enough episode for us to have you back on.
Yeah, trust us.
Exactly.
It was a good episode.
All of our
Right.
listeners are probably like, yeah, I remember that guy. So yeah, we're good.
Yeah, well, all I remember is I went on your show, and back then it was a debate that whether Nico Hischier or Nolan Patrick would be the number one pick, and I was on the side of Hischier, so I got that right.
Yep.
And if I could remember, the one thing I remember is we're just like, God, what's with this weird Cale Makar? Is he like the real deal? Coming out of what was it, the
Alberta.
Saskatchewan League?
Alberta.
It was one of those. It was Alberta League. So it's like, yeah, that league's not like on the level of the other major junior leagues. But you're like, yeah, he's the real deal. And fast forward 6+ years, and yeah, I think you were right about that.
I was
one
a bigger Heiskanen guy, and Heiskanen's a very good defenseman, but
No Makar.
yeah, not Makar, and I might have been wrong about who I had ahead at that point.
So, well, USA rosters are released. Just kind of first and foremost, obviously St. Cloud tie, #local angle. Brett Larson is the one of the assistant coaches. We got the Denver coach, Carl. What's his first name again? David, not Matt. I just
That's
don't
his
ask.
brother, yeah.
Always get that confused. So obviously, I get a little bit worried because I've seen, Denver play defense this year, and everything that I've heard about this Team USA squad is that it's a lot of smaller puck moving defensemen that will contribute a lot offensively, and we don't know about the defense side, so I'm a little bit worried if it's going to be a 1-6 affair in all of these games. But give me your take kind of on the breakdown of how this roster is set up.
Well, I think the defense is less of a disaster than last year. Last year with Rand Pecknold as the coach, the player pool was not, was even smaller than this one. And the one guy with size was Luke Hughes, who is not exactly the greatest defender. And then his one defensive-minded guy, Ryan Chesley, put in the doghouse early on. This year, I like the defense better. It's still got a lot of the same problems. Sam Renzel's a bigger guy, and Drew Fortescue will be on the third pairing, and Renzel will probably be like the 7D or whatever. Ryan Chesley's still there, and he'll be an important part. The defense is the one thing that I have an issue with, but God, the rest of this team is so good. Even with Logan Cooley in the NHL, this team's top 9 might be the best I've seen on paper in now. This is going to be tournament number 12 that I watch. And, I could go through the kind of depth they had, at left wing in particular, that, about the guys who didn't make this team. And we'll get to that later. beyond that, this goaltending tandem. Now, I think every year I've been following the tournament like from the beginning. So since 14, I've had an opinion on who the starting goaltender should be. And most of the time they've gone with my choices. I think now once they haven't. That was actually a Bob Motzko team. But like Trey Augustine of Michigan State and Jacob Fowler of Boston College, Augustine is the returning starter on this team, and Fowler is having one hell of a year at BC. I think both these guys, could be the best goalie in the tournament, whoever comes away with the job. And again, this forward group is so stacked that like Cole Iserman couldn't make this team, James Higgins couldn't make this team, Quentin Musty couldn't make this team. And I think all of those, were the right decision because they just have so many guys up front. It's all about them executing now, but I'm optimistic about this team. I think, in the years I've been following this tournament, there have only been 3 previous times where I've really liked how the roster was constructed going in previously, and they ended up with at least a silver in each of those 3.
Which years were those?
The golds in 17 and 21, and the silver in 19.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So, looking, it's a lot of East Coast flair on this. A lot of BC. Obviously, they're having a really good season this year. We don't see a lot of them here. So out west, Midwest, and obviously Arizona. But just McGroarty, huge question on his status, and he was able to make the team. We had a chance to see him in St. Cloud when Michigan came, but unfortunately he was injured during that time. So with him, possibly being a little bit banged up, you're okay with him making the roster? I thought that was kind of an interesting, with, like you said, Hagen's not making the roster, and he's projected to be what, top overall pick, top 2 pick next year?
Yeah, in 25, yeah.
So,
last year they left Will Smith off the team, who was a little bit banged up, and I understand Smith was 17 at the time.
From Bel Air.
Yes. The Fresh Prince of Lexington, Massachusetts. And, I don't know if that played into it, but with the season McGroarty is having, he's been possibly the best forward in college hockey this year when he's been healthy. When
he's been healthy and playing against Lindenwood, he racks up the points.
Well, Michigan's a different story, but
he hasn't. Like I said, I was a little surprised to see him because he hasn't played in it'll be a month and a half. And so it was the injury concern was
they did give him every chance to make the team. He says he's going to be healthy. David Carl says he's going to be healthy. They had a deep left wing group as is, and they still have a deep left wing group on the roster as currently constructed. They don't want to break up the BC line that's been so successful this year. McGroarty is the top line left winger. If he's healthy, it's a no-brainer. I think they trust that, particularly in the preliminary round where the first 2 games are not going to be particularly challenging if everything goes chalk. Mm-hmm. They might want to see him ease into playing that way. And on a top line with Cutter Gauthier, a surprise center, I thought he was going to be a left wing going into the team, and Jimmy Snuggerud. That's the line they want, and I think they're going to try and let McGroarty play his way back into shape.
Now you're also, a Minnesota fan when it comes to the Gophers, both men's and women's. I remember Snuggerud's kind of hot start. Obviously St. Thomas and then North Dakota. And then he went into a little bit of a lull. Did he snap out of that? Or obviously he has a ton of talent anyway, but I just remember that he had that little bit of a lull after 5 goals in the first 2 games or something like that, 3 games.
Snuggerud's on actually a similar pace that he was goal wise last year. It's just the assists he's not picking up, and when you're not playing with Matthew Nyes and Logan Cooley anymore,
That'll take a hit. Yeah,
but he's still the best shooter on the roster, especially now that Cole Iserman didn't make the team. And he just has to get Gauthier and McGroarty, who are great passers, to get him the puck. I still think his shot has been working.
Switching over to that defense, we got a Bemidji, we got a Beaver on the team.
Yeah, good for Eric Polkamp.
So,
dude, I was trying to Google that. Do we know if Bemidji's ever had a World Juniors player, like for U.S. or for any country?
I mean, the only I think the Bemidji Twitter account said it was their first guy, and Bemidji's not a team that would generally recruit players eligible to play in the World Juniors.
Yeah.
Right. So, like,
they reached a frozen
or to make the U-20s when you're freshman or 21.
The best NHLer ever is Joel Otto, I think. So,
I was going to say Matt Reed, but Otto probably had a longer career.
Good for Polkamp, and he deserves to be on this team, and we can talk about the defense and the similar guys they have, like Lane Hudson and Seamus Casey. So, and now Zeev Buyam, look at the year he's having at Denver.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we just got done raving about those Denver defensemen. Weldy did, at least. We actually have a literal Denver defenseman on this team. But
after
and
his older brother was the tall guy cut last year. But Polkamp, I don't think he was guaranteed a roster spot coming into the camp, and he made the team, and he's going to be in the top 6, I think.
Would you put Otto above a White Cloud?
Yeah, now that White Cloud has been making it, but like Joel Otto was on those like Team USA Canada Cup teams, and he did score a Game 7 goal in the playoffs. I don't know. I think you might give White Cloud a little more time.
Stanley Cup winner,
I suppose.
Well, I guess White Cloud's
a
Stanley Cup winner too.
Well, so that's pretty much why. A lot of talk that I saw on Twitter was kind of a big snub, and the inclusion of the defenseman from BC. But I just noticed, every time I look at Team USA and the roster and how it's constructed, I always kind of look at, where are they going with inclusion of people that do end up going the juniors route in Canada for the CHL. And I am going to defer to the announcer on how to pronounce Hunter's last name. Brustevich, who is having an incredibly impressive season. Just kind of what are your thoughts here about him not even getting a look at camp, much less not making the roster?
See, I see the idea of not including him on the team. I'm gonna preface this for the fans who might not know who Hunter Brustevich is. He was an NTDP guy. He committed to Michigan, but with that roster coming in, he elected to go to Kitchener of the OHL instead after his NTDP time ended. Right now, he is second in the OHL in points. That is among everybody. He's 13 points out of the next closest defenseman. And I don't think this is, let me say it as such. The U.S. and players in the CHL, it's not always, like, every OHL fan will say, like, he didn't make it because he was in the OHL.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily agree with that on the surface. You look at up front, there's been Gavin Hayes and Kerry Torrance, who's on this current team. You have the third goalie, Hillebrandt, who's there. Quentin Musty didn't make the team, but like I agree with that. Musty will make it next year. The thing with Brustevich or the thing with defensemen, that's become the hardest spot for OHLers and WHLers to really get a look. The last CHL defenseman to make Team USA was Hunter Skinner in 2021, but he only did because BU had a COVID outbreak and Alex Vlasic couldn't travel to the tournament.
Oh, that's right.
Before that, you're looking at Caleb Jones on the 2017 team. So, I see the argument against Brustevich when you have on the right side Seamus Casey, and Eric Polkamp. And I don't think Bristevich is better than Hudson. I don't think he's better than Casey. Booyam's going right up the boards. But the one thing that does get me a little bit is Aaron Manetian from BC. Manetian is a year younger, but he's not big. He's not over the 6 feet mark. He's not a great, he's an okay defender. So is Bristevich. And he's not really having a good offensive season. I just don't. He did play his way onto the team, but I just don't agree with because you'll have some people eligible to return next year. I don't agree with not including Bristevich or not giving him a tryout with how he's been tearing up the OHL last year or this year. And last year they didn't include Ty Voigt, who was leading the OHL in scoring for a while. I don't think it's necessarily an inherent anti-CHL bias, but coaches who see the college ranks all the time may have something against the CHL players, and that might be something to look at in the future. But I don't think Bristevich is going to be the difference between first and second and third and fourth, whatever.
Sure. I was, you kind of bring up an interesting point that I never really thought about when talking about the, like the defense side of it, because like when I think of, like the CHL, obviously I'm thinking about younger players, and so I'm thinking about how maybe these guys are used to going up against more 17 18-year-olds versus whereas some of these defensemen maybe more limited games, a little more limited college experience, but at the same time they're going against 23, 24 much stronger players when it comes to that. So I mean, I guess I'm just spitballing here, but maybe that could be kind of playing that Team USA will kind of look at that maybe a little bit with more stock than seeing maybe some of the younger opponents there in the CHL.
I think they'd probably do the same with goalies if there were enough college options for goalies. I think it's definitely something to look at. There are fewer Americans playing juniors or high-level Americans playing juniors than there used to be 10 years ago. And I think Brad Schlossman had an article about that a couple months ago. But yes, there always seems to be one omission or two that you look at every year, and to varying degrees of validity, you can look at and say, oh, like they just didn't give this guy a look because of where he's playing.
Sure. So of the CHL players, who you got? You got Terrence.
Yeah, Terrence. Actually.
And then Hayes.
Hayes. Yep.
Right.
Kevin Hayes.
So.
And then the third goalie, who's probably not going to get much or any action. I want to talk about goalies, but let's stick on D for now, because you're kind of throwing out there some pairings. It's fluid. It's not like these pairings are going to be the same throughout the entire tournament. But let's say game one against Norway, December 26th, I believe it is. We'll get you the details on the schedule, but kind of throw me some line charts, some partners here let's start with defense. I want you to do the same with forwards, but as you had mentioned too, we got two returning players for defense, Hudson
Chesley,
and
Casey was brought to the tournament last year, but he didn't play a game.
Okay.
Flashbacks of Will Bergen being taken to the Olympics.
I want to point out to you that the CHL guys, Hayes and Terrence is eligible to return next year. They'll be bottom six pairings. Terrence might not even play.
Gotcha.
But he is eligible to return next year. So, in regards to what the pairings will look like, and I think I have a pretty good idea on how it's going to shake up, at least at the start. I think Lane Hudson is the best offensive option on defense. I think you're going to pair him with Ryan Chesley, who's a more defensive minded guy. It sounds like
Kind of go with one offensive-minded defenseman with one more
that's what you'd
stay-at-home
want.
guy.
It sounds like Zeev Booyam and Seamus Casey are going to be on the same pairing, and I think because you'd want
Be
someone like
dynamic.
Booyam in your top four. It sounds like Booyam would probably be the guy to play more defense on that point. Drew Fortescue from BC is going to have some sort of role, probably in the penalty kill, and then you'll have Eric Polkamp and Sam Renzel battle it out for the final spot on the right side. I think Minetti is going to see press box.
If you had your
I
way.
like. Don't hold back the opinion, but yeah, I'm excited to watch Hudson. When I do get the opportunity to watch him, as I did in the tournament last year, in the World Juniors, and then the NCAA tournament, and then this year he's continuing his stellar career so far, and so this could be like his time to shine defensively for this team. As I mentioned, though, this is a really good core of D they got here, and a nice mix of skill guys, smaller guys in Hudson's case, but also just strong defensive players as well. So yeah, I'm interested to see how exactly it all shakes out as far as which pairing emerges as sort of like the number one pairing. If it is going to be Hudson with Chesley, or if another one of these guys that we've mentioned clicks better with Hudson, it's going to be interesting to see how the competition.
It's not a
shakes
perfect
out.
defense core by any means, and if Renzel is indeed the seventh defenseman, nobody's there is going to be over 6'1". Booyam's listed at 6'2". I don't believe it, but he could still be growing. And with the way they got manhandled last year, I think this core is a little bit more solid defensively than last year's team. Casey's a better defender than he was last year. Chesley's a good defender. You have guys like Fortescue, but they are going to be lacking in size, and I think that is the one thing you'd worry about this team. You want me to talk forwards now?
Well, can you give us just a quick refresher on how last season ended?
So last year, the U.S. won each game in the preliminary round. Probably outplayed Canada in the semifinal, and a couple of goal reviews didn't go their way, and I really think they got walked a few times. That defense where, look, all respect to Sean Behrens, who I really like, but he was the guy when Chesley was put in the doghouse. Behrens was asked to be the shutdown guy, and I think you need more than him. And then in the bronze medal game, they won 8-7 in overtime.
Yep, that's right.
That's right. And here's another dumb question: how many players can you dress in a game? Is it different than NCAA? Is it 22 or 23?
It's 22. That you bring 25 to the tournament. Canada,
right. So are you going to dress seven deep per game?
13, 7-2.
Okay. So you get an extra forward and you get an extra.
From my experience, at least from the Americans' perspective, 13th forward and 7th defenseman don't play very much. But yeah.
Gotcha.
Why don't we? Well, let's knock out goalies, because that's a fairly simple conversation. We were mentioning Hildebrand, the third goalie, the OHLer, likely not to see any action except in practice. But we've got the returning goalie with Augustine. He would have played the majority of the minutes last year. I know Mbarico's.
I think Augustine took the job from Mbarico later on in the tournament.
Right. And now you got, as you mentioned, Fowler from BC. Conventional wisdom would say go with the experience with Augustine, and he's putting up a good year with Michigan State this year. But how do you see that goalie battle shake out?
Fowler, Augustine has experience with winning. He just won the U18s last year, and he was the big reason why they managed that comeback against Sweden. He was also a starter as a 17-year-old. Fowler won the Junior A Challenge last year, and then he had a hell of a run in the USHL playoffs with Youngstown as they won the Clark Cup. And I think Fowler's having the better season, but I think if you're asked me to say which one of them is going to be a better pro, I'd say Augustine. But with the way right now, I think you have to give them both shots, like give one Czechia and give one Slovakia. And it could be as simple as whoever plays better in the preliminary round, you give the medal round. That's what they've done in previous years. I think about the first Moscow year, the 17, when Tyler Parsons and Joseph Woll, like that goaltending tandem was so good that Jake Ottinger was the third goalie that year. And then Parsons, they gave him, after having after he had won the OHL championship, the Memorial Cup the year before, he helped win gold for the U.S. and he was one of the reasons why they did. I think they're going to have to do a similar thing, see who wins the job, because Augustine and Fowler are both very good goalies, and I don't think you want to give one the starting job right away.
I think that's what Carl is also waiting for at Denver, is seeing who's going to win that starting job. And so far, nobody wants to, but I think we should just kind of stay on. I'll try to stay on topic and not bring up Denver's bad defense.
I wouldn't be surprised if he tries to kidnap one of these goalies and bring him back to Denver with him after the World Juniors. The way that he's already had to dip into the USHL early this year to bring in a goalie,
or maybe even Hildenbrand. Maybe take him. Maybe just try to pull a 1-2 over the NCAA.
Put a fake mustache on him, and
you'd have to
change his name to something that rhymes. Or I don't know.
Right. No, he didn't play any juniors. What are you talking about?
The story I did hear is that Andrew Oak, another OHL goalie who had been the third goalie at the last two tournaments, turned down the opportunity to sit in the press box again. And good for him.
Yeah, it's I'm good. Thanks.
Good for him. That's what I want to say.
You'll be the extra guy on the ice while Snuggerud is just trying shootout tricks on you. You're just the one staying late, and you're like, I'll pass.
Yeah.
All right, so why don't we draw me up some forward lines here? You mentioned, we got so many BC guys. I had to check. We got 8 or 9 players from BC in this roster. 7. I had to check too. They are not playing a game until January 12th. So they do not. They play an exhibition game on the 6th, 5th or the 6th, I think. But smart scheduling there from Greg Brown, because he would have a heavily decimated roster if he were to play a game with during this Christmas break with such a shorthanded team. So he's probably reading the tea leaves that he's going to have a bunch of players missing around this time. So smart scheduling there. But so you were mentioning that, and I'm not good with, especially, Eastern leagues that I don't follow as closely as the Western leagues, that Gauthier is going to be playing center. Yeah. Is that correct? And that's not his natural position he's been playing?
Is his name actually Cutter?
It's his middle name.
Just straight up Cutter.
Yes, it's his middle name.
I call him Cuddy, Cuddy Sark. I got a good
Gauthier does play center in college, but he was drafted as a wing, and I think long term he's a wing because he played wing with the NTDP. I kind of thought James Higgins was gonna make this roster, and Gauthier was gonna play on his wing because I wasn't sure what McGroarty's status was gonna be, and I wasn't sure that Isaac Howard was gonna make this roster. But anyway. The top 6 in whichever order is the BC freshman line, which was the NTDP line last year of Gabe Perreault, Will Smith, and Ryan Leonard, all first-round picks. Yeah,
that line's going to be intact.
You have, the other 3 in the top 6 are going to be McGroarty, Gauthier, and Snuggerud. Third line
with Gauthier centering.
Gauthier centering that line, right? And Will Smith is the center on the other line. The third line would be Frank Nazar of Michigan, centering his teammate Gavin Brindley on the right and his rival Isaac Howard on the left. And then, the fourth line, I think the only thing set is Danny Nelson of Notre Dame at center. Yeah, and then Gavin Hayes of Flint of the OHL on the right, and then I think you have three guys who could take that position: Quinn Finley of Wisconsin, Oliver Moore of Minnesota, and Kerry Torrance of Erie of the OHL. I, you know, I think Moore is the most talented of them, but Moore could also serve you well as a 13th forward. Could be Finley on that line, and Torrance is the extra. I don't know.
Talk to me about more. I've been not watching as much Gophers, certainly not as much as you have. Obviously, a lot of hype with him coming in this year, high draft pick. Not quite the hype of
Yeah.
Cooley, but
Well,
seemed like a really good prospect. How has he looked in the first half of his college
it's
career?
almost an impossible task to replace someone like Cooley. I think Moore is doing pretty well. I think he's been kind of thrust in that top line center role or top six center role. I think he's going to be playing wing for this USA team. He's got a lot of speed. Like, one thing you notice about him is he's really fast. That Minnesota team is no one's really setting the world on fire there, but they have a lot of guys doing well, and I think Moore is an important piece. And you're kind of throwing him into the fire with the loss of Cooley and having to recreate the production of that top line. I like how he's been, but Moore will have a bigger role in this Team USA next year.
Yeah, I like your line positioning here. I mean, obviously that BC line with Leonard, Smith, and Perot, as you mentioned, they've got a lot of experience playing together and a lot of success playing together. I like the idea of keeping the Michigan
Mm-hmm.
players together, with Nazar, and
Brindley.
And Brindley. I'm thinking McGroarty, but no, that's on the line with Gauthier. And then with Isaac Howard with the Michigan State from Minnesota Duluth, we always have to rub that in
I would
for our biggest fan, Dan Jacobson, who was crying after he left Duluth after a kind of disappointing freshman year. But he's found his niche in Michigan State, and he's on this roster as well. So kind of getting all Michigan line together. Again, there's going to be a lot of shuffling. I don't expect that these pairings are set in stone by any stretch. Although I'd imagine that BC line. What about for like power plays?
I just really hope that Brett Larson isn't in charge of the power play, because the way St. Cloud's power play has looked over the past couple of weeks, a lot to be desired.
Well, maybe he could take some notes to see how they can be successful.
Steve Miller's the other assistant.
And Garrett Raboin's on this. Raboin's on the staff as well, I believe. I'm not sure who's coaching which units.
They don't really tell specifics anymore. They used to when Jim Johansson was the GM, but not really anymore. As for power play, I'm now going through Chris Peters' Twitter account to find what they had working together. I think Ryan Leonard or Cutter Gauthier could be net front presences. You have like guys who can really shoot, guys like Perot, guys like Snuggerud. I think you'd want Hudson being the quarterback of the power play, and then Casey Unit 2. I think they're
Casey
really
was really impressive when he was here at St. Cloud.
I think they're really gonna try to see. McGroarty could be, a good passer on the power play. I think you have a lot of options. They're probably going to use, particularly in the Norway game, where they're probably going to score a lot or get opportunities to score a lot, to try things out. And then Switzerland's kind of in a down period from where they were 5 years ago. So I don't really have an opinion.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about these groups, preliminary groups, because the group that the U.S. is in, Group B, I would not consider that the group of death.
Let's. I just have one quick question before we go to that. And just because, Jake, I know you're a big Islander fan. Obviously, Finley and
Nelson,
kind of the two Islanders draft picks. A lot of Blackhawks draft picks on this team as well. But coming from an Islanders kind of perspective, you happy with the development that you've seen? Were you happy with the picks when they kind of came across and announced for you?
I was very happy with the Danny Nelson pick because I thought he was in the mock I had. He was ahead of where he was actually taken mid-second round.
Danny Nelson's name just reminds me of like your generic create a player on an NCAA football game. Like your recruit of Danny Nelson. And
I think everybody in Minnesota knows somebody named Danny Nelson.
It's fitting that he plays for Notre Dame too, because it's like he's just missing the O, Danny O. Nelson, because that's a pretty Irish name already.
Finley, I was not expecting him to make the roster when the preliminary roster was announced because I look at that Wisconsin. I look at that Wisconsin team, and you see a few other guys who were eligible to make it. Charlie Stramel famously did not make the team.
Shocker.
William Whitelaw got cut. Cruz Lucius didn't make the camp, and Lucius has been a pretty good player. Finley, was a guy who the Islanders drafted out of the USHL and who played an extra year in the USHL, so this is his freshman year. He's not having the greatest season so far. I think he's going to be a big part later. I'm not sure what his long-term future is, but good for him for stealing a spot at the deepest position in camp. I'm happy that he was able to do that.
Nice. So, groupings. Also, are we hitting the panic meter if we only win 2-0 against in the opening against Norway?
Well, there have been a lot of U.S. games where they start off slow. I don't really pay attention to results on Boxing Day. Obviously, you'd like to win like 9-0, but as long as you don't lose, then, or as long as like it doesn't go to like overtime or whatever, I'm gonna be fine with whatever. Yes, it's not the deepest group because who
would be the U.S.'s top competition in
Slovakia? Maybe Czechia just made the championship game last year, but I like the Slovak team. They're in a good start. Obviously, they have a couple of college connections. Maxim Sturback at Michigan State is on the team. Adam Guyan is going to be their goalie. He's off to Duluth next year, and he was their starter last year. The Czechs have Michael Hrabal from UMass on their team.
UMass. They had another European World Juniors player too. UMass does.
Yeah.
I can't remember who it is, but it seems like Harvel's got a good inroads to recruiting out in Europe.
Yeah, well, UMass. Living out east and seeing what UConn and UMass and UVM have done, I think that the road is a little bit easier for the acceptance of European students. So the coaches have kind of leaned into that. I've definitely seen that with Kavanaugh, and UConn has become my favorite Eastern team in the years since I've been living here.
Really? And they have a World Juniors player this year with Matthew Wood.
And only brought two college players in Macklin Celebrini and
Wood's good, but a little overshadowed by the other NCAA player on Canada's team with Celebrini.
Yep, that's for
sure. So yeah, I guess we're leaving out Switzerland. This is Switzerland erasure.
Well, you think about 6 years ago where Nico Hischier almost single-handedly beat the U.S. by himself before Tyler Parsons put a stop to that. Switzerland is not what they were 5 years ago. And sometimes, this all goes in cycles. Like the Czechs were so good in the late 90s and the early 2000s, and then they dipped off for a while, and now they seem to be back. This is also the Slovaks' high mark, and they're probably going to dip down in a couple years. Finland, who's in the other group, is in a little bit of a downswing for their standards. If you don't have the resources that the U.S. or Canada or Sweden or Russia, when they're in the tournament, have every year, it's not always smooth sailing. And you're good enough to stay in the top division, but you're not always any good every year.
It probably also doesn't help
So
Finland that Saniahola isn't eligible to play goalie. So
Yeah.
maybe that would give him a chance too.
Yeah, well, Saniahola and Nelly Lightning would really do some wonders for this Finnish team.
So you're going out on a limb. You're calling Team USA to take Group B.
And look, I'm not overlooking the Czechs or the Slovaks, who are very good. And like the Czechs just made the championship game and took Canada to overtime last year. I think just with the way the U.S. forwards and goalie are, I think the expectation is for them to go undefeated in the group.
And we're expecting Norway to be the team left out of this group.
Shout out to Michael Brandsegg Nygaard, who's going to be a first rounder this year, but yeah.
On Team Norway.
Am I getting his name right? Let me look that up.
Good.
Yep, that's right.
I'm trying to find out because do we know the last time that Norway's made the World Juniors? At least the top division.
I mean they've been around. Like I let me look that up.
Has Norway even had a first rounder?
Maybe. I think that the only guy who's like in the NHL full time right now is Zuccarello.
Because I'm just trying to think, like Norway's. I just think of. I mean, they always dominate the Olympic medal count, but it's always in cross country skiing. So and biathlon.
The last time Norway was in the World Juniors, let me look this up. The last time Norway was in the top division of the World Juniors was 2014. So it's been a while.
So it's been a little bit, yeah. And that is like I said, that's who the Americans have for the first game. You're not expecting a altogether tight affair. That could be like a Lindenwood type game where you maybe get both goaltenders some action and you get to work on some pairings. But hey, maybe you're going to play a 4-2 game in the third.
If Norway had a goalie I'd heard of, maybe I'd be more scared. I know they have a guy who's supposed to be a first round pick this year. I don't think, I don't want to really eat my words, but I feel fairly confident in saying the U.S. is going to beat Norway.
That first round pick, does he have a name that we know?
Brandsegg Nygaard.
Is he what? Okay,
no,
I'm not going to remember that. Is that is he a forward or defenseman?
Forward.
Okay, well,
Zuccarello went undrafted.
I guess.
Yeah, because he's like 5'7".
Huh. No Norwegian player has ever been drafted in the first round.
Yeah, Brandsegg Nygaard is a
maybe
forward.
Some history to be made.
He plays in the Swedish league with Mora, so he's not bound.
This is why we're having you on the show, because I would never have known that Norway has
this is
a guy.
This is the Elite Prospects page I'm on right now.
Perfect.
I love it. I love it. So we got one guy to be worried about, but let's hope we don't struggle too much with the Norse, the Norsemen. It's
the other Norsemen.
We're used to the St. Cloud Norsemen in the NHL, but we actually are literally playing Norsemen coming up here. So
Group A, Canada, Sweden,
Finland,
so I was going to mention Latvia. I'm always a fan of Latvia, just in general, and that's always kind of my second team. And just love their energy, their fans, and they always just seem happy to be there. But who?
I think they got an NCAA player.
They have Dan Zlochmelis from UMass.
There's UMass again. I mean, he's just United Nations bringing him into Amherst there.
I actually quite like Amherst as a city, so I don't blame him at all for going there.
And that was last year, the one that got away for the Huskies. I believe Martins Lavins played on the Latvian team last year. Actually, so he's at New Hampshire now, and I think they're billing him as Marty Lavins, which I like Martins.
You got to American it up, apparently.
But
I could talk about
Marty,
Latvian names all day and how they put an S on everything. Like, I'd actually be Jake Spaskins in that language. So
Marty Lavin is this
like
American name.
no, I mean like
Yeah, he's got to drop the S on the last
Teddy
name, too.
Bluger is Theodore's Blugers. So
So
That's good.
my big question here, before we get into who's coming out of Group A, who's getting relegated?
unless it's going to be down to Norway and Latvia, I think. I'm going to say Latvia because I will say Norway having a first rounder
will propel them ahead.
Who was the team that was relegated from last year? Who is Norway replacing?
Good question.
we know?
Let me look up. I really should have done my homework. Austria got relegated last year.
It was Austria. Okay. Yeah, that relegation match. That one's always a feisty affair.
I remember the year Finland almost got relegated.
Yep.
So,
who do we got? Are we going conventional wisdom in Canada, or are we going one of the Scandinavian?
Before I say that, I just want to point out that next year, whoever gets relegated will be replaced by Kazakhstan.
Oh,
that's already been decided.
Really?
Yeah.
So good for the Kazakhs. Anyway, Sweden has kind of used to have a reputation for being absolutely unbeatable in the preliminary round and unable to finish the job in the medal round. I think Sweden has a better team on paper than Canada, so I will say Sweden takes the group.
And we should mention they are the home team, the host nation. So they got the I guess majority of the rooting interest in the fans will be with Sweden. So yeah, I guess it maybe shouldn't have assumed Canada is going to breeze out of this group, but I would say it's between those two. I mean, just as you mentioned, Finland's a little bit down than they have been in years past. I think they're still going to be obviously a tough out. So, but I think it is between Canada and Sweden getting taking first place out of this group.
And I think it's going to be that way too. The Swedish team looks pretty good, and that group won the U18s in 2022, largely on the strength of their goaltending because the U.S. really outplayed them in that gold medal game. And 5'10" Hugo Havelid, whose dad I remember playing in the NHL, just absolutely stonewalled the U.S. in that game. The U.S. did get their revenge in the next year's U18s, but I think the 04 group really wants their revenge on Sweden for the U18s.
And anything to add about Team Germany, who's had some decent showings in international play? I mean, they're not like serious contenders, but did they? There were the silver medalists in one of the kind of the weird Olympics. Was that 2018?
Yeah, that's right.
I think it was. So I mean, they've made some noise, but I don't think they stack up to the top three here. But what do you think about
by this point in time, Germany has surpassed Switzerland as a hockey country. For the who's the best German speaking country out there. Like they finished sixth a couple of times in recent years. I haven't heard a ton about what's going on in Germany. I mean, I think they'll finish a solid fourth in their group. I might be down on Finland, but I don't think Finland is at the point of losing to Germany. Germany will let's say they make the medal round and get creamed in the quarterfinals by the U.S.
Oh, that would work for me.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary. Any other? I mean, since we are a college hockey focused show, we've mentioned in passing some other NCAA players on these non-U.S. teams, and we just kind of drove by Celebrini. Do you think he's going to be a number one pick next year, or in this 2024 draft?
He is. He's the best player available. Like there have been some other guys who have been talked about, but the year Celebrini's having in college as a freshman, like maybe some college fans will kind of like side eye it because of you just had Fantilli in the year he had last year. Celebrini has been very good this year at BU, and BU's been a good team. I think Celebrini has made it an open shut case that he'll be the number one pick. Where he plays in the Canada lineup, and Canada is usually more hesitant to trust younger players than even the U.S. is. That remains to be seen, especially now that Canada got Matthew Patra back from the Boston Bruins today. But the Connor Bedard had a great tournament last year. I think Celebrini is going to be given every chance to have a good tournament this year.
Never heard of him.
And so number one pick, presumably next year. Do you think he's a Hobie Baker winner by year's end, pulling a Fantilli?
That's a good question. The tinfoil hat in me saw the year Kyle Connor had as a freshman, the year after Jack Eichel won the Hobie. If it's close, will they give it to a freshman 2 years in a row? I kind of don't think so.
The thing that might hold him back is Hudson on his own team.
Yes.
Like if Boston University is as good as they have been so far, they might give it to Hudson because he was finalist last year.
I think the difference is I don't think Hudson is far and away the best defenseman in college hockey this year. Like statistically, Casey's having a better year, but I think it is nice that like the three highest scoring defensemen in the NCAA period are on this U.S. team.
Was because Fantilli, correct me if I'm wrong, that was Michigan, correct?
Yep.
And was that the year that Michigan had three, like their whole top line was
it was Fantilli in the two Minnesota.
That was the year before. Fantilli was last year.
Oh, geez. Okay, what am I thinking of then? Yeah.
Time flies. The year before is when they had like the three top five picks, and that was the year that they backed out of the Western Michigan.
Oh,
because
they
were
the thing that eventually got Mel Pearson fired. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that and the Strauss man thing.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, there was a laundry list of things there. But
prediction? We're gonna hold you to
it. 1 second. I'm gonna plug in my computer.
Oh, you're gonna stall? No, I got it.
He needs some juice. So you're going, Weldy. We're thinking we want predictions for who's going to win the whole ball of wax for this. Well, as we're tap dancing here for our guest, who are you thinking? Are you going to go?
That's
Team Red, White, and Blue.
That's always my pick in this tournament.
America,
that's always my pick in this tournament because I do feel that this tournament is the most exciting hockey, not necessarily the best played, but I think it's got just pound for pound the most exciting, the most action, and mistakes lead to scoring chances, which lead to a lot of action, and I think that's what I really love about this tournament. And Jake talking about the forward depth and puck moving defensemen. I don't think you can have too many of them. So that's I'm picking USA in going undefeated throughout the tournament and winning.
So here's what I will say. I have been watching this tournament since 2013. I have never seen Sweden win the tournament. Sweden's last one was 2012. They have become known for choking in the big one.
You're not going to go Team Sweden
Let me say this.
Podcast.
So, in order for me to pick Sweden, I'm going to have to see Sweden win. I'm not doing it this year. I'm saying the U.S. gets gold. And beating Sweden in their home country in the final.
In the final.
Like it was the first year that I watched the tournament when the U.S. beat Sweden in the 2013 final in Russia, the lockout year. I'm saying U.S. gets gold number 6 of this tournament, and if that happens, obviously I'm going to enjoy every minute of it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to make it a clean sweep if that was surprising, but I just looking at this U.S. roster, I know that before the show we were waxing poetic about prior rosters for these World Junior teams. And, at World Junior time, looking back at the previous rosters, and we littered with all these NHL stars and these teams, and it's kind of their coming out party as like nationally known hockey prospects. And so it's not like, but what I'm saying, like this year's roster, I'm looking at this roster, I'm like, I already know how good these guys are. Like, I don't even need to be persuaded about them. I'm not going to say that this is like the best roster the U.S. has ever put out there, but I think it's up there talent-wise, just from a pure skill standpoint. And yeah, I think that I'm going to say Canada might be a little bit down. I don't think they're like as great as they have been. And so, yeah, I think that the toughest part, I think, will be, because I think Sweden's going to have a good tournament based on they're going to be in their own backyard. So I like that pick. I'm not going to copy you completely. They're going to have to play Sweden sometime in the
Sweden's
in the
getting upset
round.
somewhere along the line.
But
I mean, like, if it ends up the U.S. is 1 and Canada, Sweden is 1-2, then they're going to play one of them in the semi and one of them in the final.
Okay.
And I'm going to say the U.S. beats both of them. I'm going to say they have a tougher time with Canada than they do with Sweden, even if they play Sweden in the final. But, I don't think I've never seen a bad World Junior Championship game. Even games that have, a multi-goal score at the end, they're all competitive. Like, a lot of these games are absolute classics.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the 2010 game, although I did not watch this because I was not around at the time, but I've gone back and watched it since. The U.S. won 6-5 over Canada in overtime. The great 5-4 game over Canada in 2017 that ended in a shootout. They don't even have shootouts in the IHF championship games anymore because Canada complained about that one.
Weldy's a big fan of shootouts. I know you don't listen to the show regularly, but he's a big fan of shootouts. A recent convert, but he's a big fan.
I always say you play by the rules in front of you. So, however it takes for the U.S. to win. I've seen World Junior victories. I've seen that Olympic women's victory. I'll take.
When did they change that? Would have been the year after.
I think it would have changed it after the 2018 Women's Olympics.
So what do they just play unlimited overtimes?
Yeah, so they do it 3-on-3. Like in the women's U18 tournament in 20, they played, like, the U.S. and Canada played a very deep overtime before the U.S. finally won, and they played 3-on-3 that whole time. And I'm like, God, these people have to be absolutely crazy.
Was it a 20-minute period?
Let me make sure, but it probably went 16, 17, 18 minutes before it ended. Let me just make sure.
Just impressive for 3-on-3 to last that long.
Yep.
If they were playing an ECAC game, they would have each gotten a half point after the 5-minute mark. So
that game, the U.S. and Canada on the goal by Kiera Zanin ended 16-52 into overtime. So yeah,
which year was that?
Women's U18.
Okay. So. Zanin now on Ohio State,
that's right.
I believe. Penn State transfer. So yeah, it should be an interesting tournament, as they always are. We were discussing before the show, and we should maybe throw it out there for some of our fans who are intrigued by this. If you're relatively new to the U-20s World Junior Championships, we can watch these games through NHL Network, the official provider, at least stateside, of these games. How do we get NHL Network?
That's always the lovely question.
Does anybody have an idea where I can get NHL Network? And I'm giving anyone a wide berth here to step in with a sweary sort of, PG rated at least, rant about why these games can be on something else than NHL.
So when I started watching this tournament, we had NHL Network because we had Verizon Fios at that time. And that continued up until my parents wanted to move to a little bit closer to the beaches of Connecticut, which they actually exist. Now that now that we have YouTube TV, we don't get NHL Network, and I think the last 2 years I've had to watch the tournament on hockey, which is illegal. Don't do it. But
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
yeah,
Wink, wink,
Say no
nudge,
more.
nudge, nudge. Put an ad blocker on and
it
cruise
sucks,
at your
and
risk.
it's really not the way to do this. Like, I think did we have a question from a listener coming in about this?
We actually did. Dan Jacobson, shocker. But obviously a really good question, because this has been my hang up over the years, that you got to make, like, when I say that this is the most exciting hockey, I mean, I think this is the type of tournament that could really convert fans.
Yeah.
And if you have it gatekeeped onto NHL Network, which is on like tier 4 or 5 of any cable package, it's not even on like an extended sports package. It's like buried with that. And then obviously they're not going to stream the games anywhere. NHL or hockey in general is just kind of shooting itself in their own foot when it comes to it. But yeah, Dan Jacobson's question: would the World Junior Championships be better off streaming on ESPN Plus versus NHL Network? So just strictly a streaming service versus a buried cable service.
Let me find a way to answer this question. Yes.
Okay, there we go.
Absolutely, because that means I would be able to watch it without any extra.
You could be unselfish and do both. Like, if you don't want to,
No.
if you're a person who doesn't happen to have ESPN Plus, but you do have NHL Network, yeah, no problem showing it on NHL Network. I mean, NHL Network does do their own broadcast for the U.S. games. My buddy Steven Nelson used to do the games before he left for the Dodgers. But like,
didn't we have some
Starman's the color
Starman? Was
commentator.
he like pushed out of the World Junior? Did he do the World Juniors
Yeah,
last
he's
year?
done
Or
the
I
World
thought there was
Juniors
some
most of the time I've
controversy.
been watching. I actually met him a couple months ago.
And
Yeah.
in-person impressions of the Starman.
Same guy in person as he is on TV.
That doesn't surprise me.
I said hi to him. I think I may have even shook his hand when I was at a BC game. This was like 5-6 years ago now, but he was there. Oh, Huskies look great. So that was my best Starman impression. Just imagine my hair slicked back
at that time.
He is an assistant coach for a team in the North American 3 Hockey League, and I do a few games of my organizations, and they've come to where we are. So I've met him a couple times. I've actually handed him my team's lineup a couple times.
So with that, I know you're big into the commentating scene. You like to kind of rank commentators and announcers and play-by-plays. Yeah. Where would you put the Starman when it comes to it?
I mean, like, Starman serves a certain type of fan, and the guy who definitely has a scouting background and wants you to know that. But I actually like his insight for. Let me say that the state of college hockey commentary is not always great.
Thoughts on Gino Parrish
and lots of places, particularly out east where I live, feel low budget. Like, if you're watching a Hockey East game and it's not on Nesson, there seems to be something lacking to it. And this is not a slight against any of the broadcasters in particular. It's just you're not given enough resources.
Sure.
So, like, what I miss about watching more Western games, and I try and see as many Minnesota games as I can, and I try and keep in touch on who the American prospects are. So, but I try and do my job. But, like, what I appreciate about CBS and BTN is it at least feels like maybe not the ideal college hockey game should, but like it feels like, oh, like I'm definitely watching a Division I game here.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, we have fun about Starman, but in general, I'll take him over over a lot of announcers, and some like I've been really scraping the well here of Big Ten Plus. I think there's a bit of a chasm between
Yes.
regular Big Ten Network and Big Ten Plus when it comes
Yeah.
to the announcing. There was even a game earlier this year, a Michigan State Ohio State game, that literally had no announcers. Like it was just the video, and there was no announcers at all. Which I would sometimes I'd prefer that over the announcers that we do
Like
get.
I mean,
Sometimes.
I've talked
But
to Dan Kelly plenty, and I've listened a lot to Ben Holden and Jason Ross and the guys at BTN. I think in terms of play by play, I generally like where it is at the national level, except for
The Frozen Four.
yeah, and Butcher Gross is a lot better than he was 10 years ago, but he still has a ways.
I would agree with that.
I
said that unpopular
I
opinion
would say
last
he's
year.
a lot better than he was like 5 years ago.
Yeah, I
So.
think I think he does keep getting better, but like, is he at the point where you want a Frozen Four announcer to be? I don't think he is.
No.
And at least I've heard, because I would only hear Colby Cohen and Raycroft. I would only hear them at the Frozen Four the last couple of years, but I've been seeing that they've been getting them some action on these ESPN Plus regular season games. So it's nice to get them.
And I think Butcher Gross is a big reason for that. I think he's actually pushing for more games there. And now the women's tournament's on ESPN, and you have Clay Matvick with AJ Malesko, who I think is great.
St. Cloud State's own Clay Matvick.
Yeah. And I think Malesko is a great analyst. But I in the men's college hockey ranks in particular, I wish we had more analysts who played college hockey, because that makes it feel like the other sports have, even like the baseball or volleyball or lacrosse. Not like I'm not the only person who shares the opinion that the lacrosse tournament is the best slate of NCAA announcers going. But I wish it weren't X guy who played in the CHL or X guy who like was in and out of the lineup for X Division I team. I wish you'd have more guys with the acumen of Colby Cohen or Pat Micheletti, who like do have the legitimacy of being like college stars, because I feel that's what other sports get.
We need more Doug Woog, I think, is actually what we're that might be a little dated.
Rest in peace. R.I.P.
Exactly.
To the Wooger.
Maybe a little bit dated for you, Jake. So sorry.
I know enough.
Just if you Google Woogisms,
yeah. Look, I'm on GPL all the time.
Oh, fair enough. That's true.
There's a Woogisms page there.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I mean, it is what it is. As a Minnesota fan, definitely more games are available than any other team in the country for me to watch. So
that's so weird, because I keep hearing Minnesota like sports personalities say, God, I just never can find the Gophers anymore. I was so used to Fridays at 7 p.m. on MSC, and I don't have that anymore. So I'm not even going to be a fan. I'm not even going to follow them anymore. That's why I hear so much on
now that Bally's gone, and you know more about that living there than I would. It definitely is a little different this year, but
now they're bumping the Huskies off.
Yeah, they're on Fox 9 Plus. My brother, who doesn't even have cable,
I must say I'm a big
Jim
Rich
because
fan.
they're on Fox 9 Plus.
I'm a big Jim Rich fan.
I've got thoughts.
I want him to understand overtime. Is actually my whole goal.
Yeah, he struggles with that. He struggles.
Which again, make it a lot easier, but then that goes into the whole shootout, and I don't want to unearth that argument again. But when it comes to the commentating, and I do really feel that you hit it right on the head when it comes to like having more ex players who are impactful college players. I just feel like so many of them have so much like personality beaten out of them by hockey culture, and that they still have they're just boring. They're just boring
Mhm.
people. Bedard is boring.
Yeah.
Crosby, boring. McDavid, pretty boring. Like, we don't have any flashy.
They found that out pretty quickly with Bedard when they were interviewing him after every single shift for his first 2 weeks in the NHL. They gave that up because they're like, we've gotten everything that he's got.
Yeah,
He
no,
doesn't have
it's
anything
it's
more.
why I
So,
definitely see, every time there's a new right switch in the NHL, the same guys like, Joe Micheletti and Darren Pang keep getting chances, and them not uh trusting, the new blood of NHL analysts, who some of them I think are very good.
Holy
Uh
jumping.
yeah, I'm not
that was exactly what was in my head
I'm
when you
not
said
a
Darren
Pang fan,
Payne.
and I think I've made that perfectly clear. But
Yeah.
I
Would
but
you
like
would you rank the Michelettis? Where would you rank the Michelettis?
I mean, like the problem with Joe Micheletti right now is you'd want someone younger. Like I think Ray Ferraro does a great job. I think I like Brian Boucher. No, these aren't guys who played college hockey, but like there are NHL analysts out there who did. Uh and maybe they, because they've had NHL spots, they might be seen as having surpassed the college level, which is fair. But like out here, I do enjoy Andrew Raycroft, but the fact is he did not play college hockey, and he's now being seen as, and let me not take this as like in the elitist method that it definitely sounds right now, but like I look at using lacrosse as an example, I think of the analysts they have, Clint Kesnick and Paul Carcaterra, who are both impact players on national championship teams at very good lacrosse schools. And like now that Barry Melrose is, unfortunately his illness has taken away his career, and I'd like to see more guys in the position that Colby Cohen
Sure.
was in jump into. And you're right, there's definitely a personality divide, but like if you're X amount of years removed from your playing career, I think you can get that level back in you, like as long as you get like the enough reps. Like
Sure.
how many guys are there in ex college hockey players who live in Boston or live in Minnesota or live in Detroit? Like there are so many you could try out, and I think it's I think it's kind of lazy that it's just left up to ESPN to try and figure that
Sure.
out.
Anyway, a question that I forgot to ask. So let's go back to the fish story here.
So anyway, the infamous fish story.
Let's say USA wins gold here, and where would you kind of rank this team as a possibility of ending up versus some of the other gold medal winning teams that USA has? Or even right now, where would you kind of rank them in terms of hype?
I don't want to set expectations too early. I think that 17 team, I think really, even missing guys in the NHL, I think, Austin Matthews was in the NHL by that point, and Noah Hannafin and a couple of others. But that team really felt like the best team in the tournament. And I think 21, the lockout team, even though they were missing Jack Hughes, that to me felt like the best team. And that was probably the most satisfying win to me because Canada felt unbeatable. They had some absurd goal differential, and the U.S. just did not let them get in front of the net. And it was a perfectly played game plan by Nate Lehman. I can't say where they slot yet. Like, because if they do like a 13 team and have to really pull themselves off the ground before going on some kind of run, we'll see if that happens. If they finish undefeated, I think there's going to be legitimate talk about, is this the greatest U.S. team ever to participate at this tournament? And I think it's a fair shot to make. But 17 and 21. I think 04 were the ones who finished undefeated.
Let me put it this way: like, is this team good enough where, let's say, failing to make the title game, is that going to be considered a disappointment?
Wow. All right.
Failing to win the whole thing, is that going to be
Maybe
a disappointment?
But
one game is always tough to beat.
I don't think the U.S. is at a point where they can expect gold every year.
Yeah.
At the U18s, where they went, a few years without winning, I think not winning the gold is a disappointment. At the World Juniors, where it's still Canada's tournament, I think you can't have the expectation that the U.S. is going to win every year. But you're at the point where you have to win a medal every year, I would think.
One final question before we move on to just touching on some women's hockey and NCAA hockey.
So yeah, we're at now we're 15 plus here. Jay,
which is early for us.
It's early for us, but you're on the East Coast. So Jake, you okay if we keep going?
Yeah. I don't know how long your episodes go, but I can talk.
We crossed 2 hours more than we would like.
Okay.
It's probably our average.
I'm right now living 20-25 minutes away from my office, and I don't have to be in until 10, so I'm good.
All right, so we're not keeping you too bad up past your bedtime too much. I want to ask you this: it was Dennis Williams was Canada's coach last year at the juniors, I believe. No, is he still the coach?
The coach is a guy named Alan Latang.
What I want to ask you is, I know Canada, the model for at least Canada versus the U.S. is different. Where U.S. is every year you got a different head coach, a different staff, whereas Canada will carry over staffs. The U.S. and other countries will too.
I think in recent times repeated coaches when they've won gold.
I guess Motzko was a back-to-back. Lehman did 21 and 22, or was he
21-22?
Okay, so if you win it,
I would have actually had an argument for Hastings coming back in 20, but they did not do that.
I was just kind of gauging what you think about that model. As you mentioned, there are exceptions to the rule for U.S. switching it up every year, but other countries do tend to have a little bit more consistency with their staffs. Do you have a preference, or do you like?
I like how the U.S. does it now. Motzko in year 2 and Lehman in year 2 did not do well. I think in Motzko's case, he still got a bronze out of it, but I didn't like how the second teams were set up. I don't think
Paling was on that second team, right?
What?
Ryan Paling was on that team.
Yeah,
the 18.
He might have. He was definitely on that 19 team with Hastings because he was standing right in front of the net when Finland scored the winning goal.
Yeah, we're aware.
We don't remember that.
I think he was on both teams. Yeah. I'm not on the surface against repeating coaches, especially if the coaches do a good job, which Motzko and Lehman definitely earned it. But I think if you're now that they're going to the current college coach model, which I agree with, you want to build up the next level. I think there are a number of guys who deserve to be considered, and the one guy who hasn't been there yet, who I think should, is Greg Carvel.
Sure.
Right. Has he ever been even an assistant?
I think he was an assistant way back
staffs?
when.
Okay.
But
we're just mentioning him getting all these European players. He's got the ability to get guys from other places, and great coach. I agree with that.
I thought Pecknold was the right guy last year. I think, the way he set up the defense last year really wasn't great, but I don't think he was the reason why the U.S. didn't advance to the title game. The defense pool was tough as it is. Pecknold just didn't help himself there. I wanted David Carl this year. And I guess now I'm going to see how he does. And if he wins, or if, they take silver and he does a good job, I'd think about bringing him back. I think it's too early to say. If not, Carvel's the next guy I want. And I like the U.S. strategy, take a college coach and, if you want to bring a guy back later on, you can do it. I didn't like Scott Sandelin's second go around at all. I thought that was the 20 team was really done in by coaching. And no, disrespect for Sandelin as a coach, but I thought
we could disrespect him on this podcast. All for it.
Yeah, no,
Safe
safe space.
We don't care for how Duluth plays, and sorry to Dan Jacobson on that.
But like, I think that the real turning point to get the college coaches in there was the one year when the U.S. brought Ron Wilson back from the dead to coach the team in 2016, and they left Kyle Connor off the roster the 1 year of college he played. And I think that really led to the change in strategy. Motzko came in the next year and they won gold.
Mm-hmm.
They went a couple of weird ones. I mean,
yeah,
Housley
they
did
won
it 1 year too, and he actually had a pretty good. Did they win the whole thing, or was it silver? Okay, yeah, and I know he had a good tournament, but that was a pick that I kind of came out of nowhere.
The year before Wilson, it was Marco Siki back when he was coaching in the AHL.
Okay, yeah, so they went a little rogue there. Siki had plenty of college experience.
In between then, it was Lucia in 2014. So yeah, I think the year Hastings was the coach. He was the second choice because David Quinn initially accepted the job and then left for the Rangers. So they've all, yeah.
And where would you say the chances of our own Brett Larson getting the head job? I mean, the second time he's been assistant, correct? And he had the assistant gig at the Olympics in 2022. I think. So he's put in some time as an assistant with the international teams. I think if St. Cloud
keeps doing well, he'll get his shot. I would say not yet, although I'd give him an assistant job as many times as he feels comfortable. As for the head job, not yet, but maybe one day. And probably one day.
Yeah, and we guys kind of blew over this. I mean, no St. Cloud players this year, obviously. Just the one NCHC player with Booyam, because one of the last cuts was that... He's a love, yeah. I can't say the name with North Dakota. Such a shame that North Dakota doesn't.
A lot easier to root for them. But North Dakota guys are on.
Yeah, so it's strange. NCHC has as much representation on this team as the CCHA does, which is you can't say that too often. I mean, it's BC, BU, and the Big Ten basically is where you're picking this team from, and so. That's going to be interesting, but yeah, this conversation's really jacked me up for this tournament.
It's my favorite time. It's my favorite time of the hockey calendar, and I like it. And it's where I feel my most patriotic.
And we can use this too to sort of recap a little bit of the first half of both the men's side and the women's side, and you being a Gopher fan, we're not going to hold that against you too much
right now.
But
we're not going to hold it right now. But in general, we still might.
So you're Gopher. You bleed the maroon and gold. Correct me if I'm wrong. Not a Minnesotan.
I'm from Maryland.
Why? Yeah. Why? Explain the Gopher fandom.
So
just briefly.
In 2008-09, the Frozen Four was going to be held in DC, and I went. And I saw the Colby Cohen game. I decided at that point.
We call it the Miami meltdown.
Yeah. But I'm Jewish, so there's some pride with Colby Cohen there. So,
did he score the winner, the two-hopper?
Okay. And I think I decided in that 08-09 team I wanted to start following college hockey. I was 12 years old at this time, and it came down to who had the most games on television that I could watch. And that was Minnesota. So, for better or worse, I've been stuck with them ever since. Since I've moved up here to Connecticut, like the Quinnipiac game last year was very conflicting. Well, very conflicting in some ways to me, because I moved to Connecticut in 2016. But I had watched that Quinnipiac Yale final in 2013. And so it became easy.
I watched that too. I had a good seat for that one.
And it became easy to go to Quinnipiac games, to go to Yale games, to go to UConn games. And I think, since being here, both my parents are from Connecticut. I developed an affinity for for the schools here and the players who are from here. But I realized around the time of last year's championship game that I wasn't ready to root for Quinnipiac over Minnesota. So
Okay. What part of Connecticut are you at right now?
So I live around New Haven, or my parents do, but right now I'm working in Danbury. So
Are there parts to Connecticut?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, which one you're closer to. I'm sure it's all kind of packed in tightly.
It's definitely a small state, but like there's definitely a New York suburb versus rest of Connecticut part of. I do not. Well, I guess now I work somewhat close to New York, but I definitely identify with the New Haven metro area. Yes.
Good pizza there, I hear.
Yes.
New Haven pizza is.
I'm glad that is. So have you become known throughout the country in the last number of years? Because I've been coming to New Haven for pizza related reasons since I was probably like 6 or 7 years old. So I'm glad everyone knows now.
Hopefully, I'll be able to try it one of these days. So, have you been to some of those rinks, like UConn's?
I have not been to the new UConn rink yet. I saw games when they were playing in Hartford. I've been plenty of times to Quinnipiac and Yale. I was just at Yale a couple weeks ago.
Have you been to Sacred Heart?
I have not been to the new rink.
Travis, a big Sacred Heart fan on this show. Have you been to the new barn there in
I have not. Fairfield? I've been meaning to. I've seen him play in Bridgeport. I've met Coach Maritolo a couple of times. Nice guy. I like him because he's around my height.
That helps.
Yeah, little Italian men stick together.
Yeah, I was reading. So I was looking at UConn's schedule, and I saw that they still have like 4 games in Hartford this year. And I'm like, well, they just opened a new building and stores. And so I was doing some research. Apparently, the Connecticut State Legislature got involved, and they said you have to play a certain amount of games in Hartford.
The problem with Toscano is they built Toscano much smaller than it should have been. Like if it holds.
So they're selling out no problem there because it's like 2,500 or something is the capacity.
It should have been, a 3,500, 4,000 seat arena. I think, because it ends up smaller than Quinnipiac, and Quinnipiac has packed the place as long as I've been going. And like I understand UConn wants their own, but I think it was a supreme misstep making it like the smallest rink in Hockey East, especially with the kind of recruits that UConn's been getting lately. Yeah,
and kind of a bit of a down year for them this year. I mean, pretty close to the tournament last year.
They were one goal away from the tournament in 22, and my girlfriend went to Northeastern.
That's right.
So Northeastern got in, was saved by UMass beating UConn in that game. So that was not fun.
Well, we could go on about Connecticut hockey for a while, but let's stick to the Gophers.
So I just also want to. Is my explanation good enough for how I became a fan? Just because they were the team with the most games on TV?
Oh yeah, it's almost like that 7 p.m. MSC argument. It's almost, or Valley Sports or Fox Sports North or whatever at that time. So it's you're kind of feeding into that. It was
Fox Sports and BTN because I had Fox College Sports as a channel back when we had FiOS. It was just like I'm like. This was before the streaming days, so it's like this is the team I can follow. These are guys who get drafted, and I'd find out later would play on the World Junior team. It felt the most natural to me, and I understand that I have drawn the ire of basically everyone else in the Midwest with my decision, but
it's understandable because, like I said, you didn't have a ton of choices. It was either that or going to the Anchorage feeds, which some of us did in those years for their great commercials.
If I had lived in Connecticut my whole childhood, I would probably be rooting for someone up here. And look, I do want Quinnipiac to do well. I do want UConn to do well.
I don't know. I'm sick of.
For UConn, it's a Husky thing. Like I root for other Huskies. So I want UConn.
I'm
to
sick
make
of
the
St.
tournament
Cloud
one of these
losing
years.
to Quinnipiac. So that
that
can
can stop. Well, how about this for a transition? So you've talked about the Gophers, and we'll get back to them. But so let's talk about some women's hockey because, or you follow UConn women's hockey at all? Because I was going to say, pretty decent year, and for Hockey East's basically auto bid only league this year, they have as good a shot of anyone to make the tournament that year or this year. Understandable. Mm-hmm. They just don't have any offense. I mean, they don't have any offense left.
Yeah.
Yeah, is it the downfall of the Hockey East, or is it more the rise of the ECAC as the supreme league?
I mean, I think the ECAC has never accurately, the way people view the ECAC on the men's side is not really ever an accurate representation of how it was on the women's side. Because Clarkson's pulled off natties, Colgate's been in the title game.
Yep.
I think just now it's more pronounced that like the Beanpot schools outside of Northeastern have really had their downfall, and the rest of Hockey East hasn't been doing a ton. And I think that's opened the doors for schools like Vermont and UConn to maybe climb in, and I think BC's having a better year this year. But the ECAC's recruited Ontario, which is, maybe the best population center for women's hockey that there is, very well. Basically the same way that the WCHA recruits Minnesota.
Yeah.
And maybe New England's had a bit of a downfall. I'm not sure if that's true. It could be. Hockey East has become kind of mid in recent years, especially once you get past like the top team, and now I think it's really at the lowest point. Something needs to change. Maybe it is changing. I don't know, but I hope UConn makes it this year. That would be fun.
Well,
it's always nice to get some new blood, and they have a really good goalie, if I'm not mistaken. Like one of the better numbers. Again, it's a lesser league.
China back in 22, yeah.
And I think that's what was, what really stuck out to me.
She was on Team China at the Olympics. Would that have been? Was Adulski? Adulski was coaching in China, but he wasn't the national coach, was he?
I don't think so.
I know he was coaching
Lander?
China. I'm not sure.
I don't remember.
But he said China, and I thought that he may have been the coach at that Olympics for them. But I know he's coaching some, maybe not the national team, but I know he was coaching in China in some capacity. But anyway, maybe that can transition us to the West in women's college hockey in the WCHA. My co-host on the show a couple weeks ago, I think he called the Gophers. They're kind of mid. I think was his exact quote.
I'm not going to say they're mid because, like, if mid for them,
I thought that was a little extreme.
I
think it's a dip. I think it's a dip
context
from what we've come to
mid
know.
By Gopher women's hockey standards is still a top 5 team in the country. So, but
maybe that's what he was.
I think they're a step below Wisconsin and Ohio State this time around.
Yeah,
and that's what we we agree on that as well.
Really, this year, obviously, you lose players like Taylor Heisey and Grace Zumwinkle, and some very underrated players like Abby Breen. You're going to lose a little. I don't think I expected them to be as reliant on the top line as they have been. I haven't really been a fan of the Minnesota women's defense in a few years now. I don't think they've, like, obviously nobody has a Caroline Harvey except Wisconsin, or like a Sophie Jakes in previous years, but
Right.
like I think Minnesota's lacked that player maybe since Lee Steckline, and that's hurt even if they've had pretty good goaltending. Skylar Vetter's a very good goalie. Lucy Morgan's having a great year. But the team is carried so much by that line, the top line of Bouveng, Huber, and Murphy, especially Abby Murphy. Who's
we're getting to know her quite well.
I think Murphy.
She can't score on St. Cloud State, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So that's
that's what's going to happen. They need to get that depth scoring, and they need to get some defensive scoring, or their season is going to end. No later than the Frozen Four.
And that seems to be what's separating them from Wisconsin and Ohio State, namely, is that scoring depth. I think. I mean, they played those teams pretty well this year. I mean, aside from the last loss or the last game in the first half here, the loss against Wisconsin, you had two competitive games against Ohio State. You lost both of them.
Yeah.
One in overtime.
Well, Skylar Vetter
played Ohio State pretty well.
God mode that Ohio State series, so they had no business being in there.
Don't call her daughter, as we call the daughter of Eddie Vetter. Had the song named after her, and so
I listened to rock radio as a kid.
Say that about her. Oh yeah, it's great. I don't like to see the shots of Eddie Vetter in the crowd so often. It's like, we get it. You say it once and then you move along. We don't need to keep continuing.
It's like Taylor Swift cam, but Eddie Vetter.
Anyway.
Do you think Skylar Vetter's heard of Pearl Jam? I don't know.
It's a good question.
Like, she was born in 2003. It could be 50-50.
Well, no, that can't be, because that song came out in 1991 and it was about her. So I don't know if I like.
I don't know what Frost is doing there with eligibility requirements and being able to keep it under.
Yeah, he's got this 32-year-old.
I mean, like,
on the back.
If Lee Steckline could, if Amanda Kessel could play like into her 40s with the Gophers,
yeah. So would you like?
So,
you talk about you said Hennessy, right?
What, Heisey?
I'm sorry.
Heisey.
Now, like, would you, like, as far as like Gopher female hockey players, would you put her on like a Mount Rushmore? And
yeah, I mean, I've been following the team probably since kind of the end of that undefeated season they had in 2013. I didn't pick them up as quickly as I did the men, because like I wasn't finding those games in Maryland.
Yeah, I mean that's.
But I, especially with the Olympics going on in 2014, that like I think of players like Kessel, who when she came back and they won the title in 2016. Hannah Brandt was a great Gopher. Obviously the success that Steckline has had on the Olympic team, and eventually players like Kelly Panic. I think Heisey's right up there with Kessel.
Yeah.
The fact that
she didn't win a title, right?
No, I'm about to say this. And the fact that they did not win a title with her really has me. And really didn't get screwed out of one either. I was actually at the 2019 championship game. Yeah, when it was at Quinnipiac. I think the expectations for Minnesota should be a lot higher than that. And if you waste the careers of Heisey and Abby Murphy, who are two of the greatest Gopher players I've ever seen. And I know, like, eventually there's talk about whenever Chloe Primerano comes in, the top Canadian recruiters do it in a couple of years. Like, they're getting the talent, but it's not like they've been choking. They've lost because they've been outplayed, and that is frustrating to see. Like, I understand, if they were. For me, well, if they were choking, it would be frustrating in a different way. But like,
wait, we're getting to the men's team. Just hold on for a
choking.
minutes.
But like, yeah, you have like these singular players who become college superstars, and it's entirely possible, that they hold Murphy's play style against her. But you have like Patty Kazmaier caliber players, basically nonstop for a while, and you can't win with that. What you can't win, you can't finish the job. That kind of sucks.
Sure. Now, does Abby Murphy always just play ticked off, or is that her play
Yes.
style? Or
Yes.
okay, gotcha.
Like like with the way the U.S. played the rivalry series games, Murphy gets under everybody's skin. Like it was you don't see Americans really play like that very much. It's been like a Canadian thing. I guess Abby Rock at Wisconsin was kind of like that, but like Murphy brings that to a new level, and everyone goes after her, and a lot of players hate her because, and like she's not very big either.
Yeah.
Yes, she plays like that.
Yeah, because I mean, I know like her and Himlarova when St. Cloud played, like they had quite a few tussles, especially at Ritter. That's one thing that I really noticed. But I think during the rivalry series, like her and Marie Poulin really kind of jar back and forth with each other. I absolutely love Canada USA women's hockey. It's God, they hate each other so much. It's
I just wish they wouldn't have had that game at Mullet on Wednesday night. If it was on a weekend, I would have gone. It was just a bad night for.
I got to.
Midweek.
They played a rivalry series game in Hartford back in 19, and I went to that, and that was actually quite a bit of fun.
Yeah.
Anytime you get international hockey, especially U.S. Canada, like sign me up. But
I have a lot of thoughts on U.S. Canada, and I think Canada's been winning the physical battle, and that's why they've come away with the wins. The U.S. did get the win at Worlds last year, but like Canada has had the better U18 teams of late. And I think that's, they have more nasty players. And I think you need to even the playing field. And I think that's where someone like Murphy comes in, someone who does not shy away from anything, perhaps to her detriment at times, but does not shy away from anything.
So being kind of this outsider perspective, watching some games, obviously where St. Cloud State is right now, we're really battling Minnesota Duluth for that home playoff series, because it's pretty much set in stone right now that these two are going to be the matches, unless something kind of miraculous kind of happens. That like as kind of seeing these two teams, do you have any insight on kind of what you think? I thought St. Cloud is a little bit ahead of Duluth, and obviously I'm biased when it comes to that. And the fact that Adolski's turnaround of this program has come so quickly, maybe I'm drinking a lot of the Kool-Aid of it, but like I don't know if you're able to watch those Minnesota games against both teams, but like what were kind of some of your thoughts?
I'm able to watch enough. I have been so impressed with how Adolski has turned around, a program that, maybe people thought at some point that like Mankato or St. Thomas was going to pass him, and Adolski said, "Well, this team's not. We want to be, the best team in the WCHA." And while I don't think that's the case, I think they're an easy NCAA tournament team this year. And like Adolski hasn't even got his recruits yet, and I know how from the later years of his time at North Dakota what his teams play like, and he's building them that same way at St. Cloud. I've been so impressed, and obviously the year that a Hull has had, and having a 1B like Cho back, that team, I'm not going to go and say they're a problem, but they can be a real pain in the ass for anybody who is in that top three. And I think Duluth is a team they should be competing against. Who's better right now, I don't know, but I'll tell you what, if I play St. Cloud in the WCHA tournament, I wouldn't necessarily be happy.
So are you thinking? So right now we got 5 WCHA teams that would
Right.
make the tournament. 5 in the top
Mm-hmm.
7, I believe. Are we thinking that's going to hold like 5 WCHA teams and 3 ECAC teams, or are we thinking maybe a 4th ECAC team is going to knock one of those WCHA
The
teams off?
ECAC is beating the crap out of each other all year, and I think Colgate and like Colgate's been good for a bit. Clarkson and Cornell are good. Quinnipiac's good. St. Lawrence, I guess. Princeton, Yale. Like the ECAC, top to bottom is very competitive and very good. I think really it's about who keeps winning, and like are the top 3 in the WCHA going to beat on St. Cloud and Duluth the way the ECAC teams are pounding on each other, and that's going to determine exactly where the split lies between the two teams.
By the way, I just checked. Tia Chan, the UConn goalie, was on the Olympic team, and which was coached by Brian Adelsky.
Oh, wow.
He did coach Team China in the 22 Olympics. So there was a Husky connection to the UConn Huskies even. So yeah, what do you think of, just briefly, have you watched much of Clarkson this year? Undefeated, hasn't lost. They've had a couple of ties, but haven't played Colgate yet, which is the best team, the other great team in that league, the other sort of lock to make the tournament in ECAC so far.
And I think as a Gopher fan, like the one player in the country they're really missing is the person who transferred out, Ann Cherkowski, who just got called up by Canada for the rivalry series. And you see the team that Clarkson has, players like Swiderski. I think they're a good team. I still think even Colgate, who I've known to be good for a bit and has a great goaltending situation of their own, I still think they're a cut below at least Wisconsin and possibly Ohio State as well. And
so you're expecting an all West final
if like whatever the tournament format turns out that way, I expect Wisconsin to win at least. I still, now that Harvey's healthy again.
You think Wisconsin's the team to beat nationally? I think
Wisconsin's the team to beat nationally. Even if now eventually they need to realize that McNaughton is the best goalie on the roster.
Well, I think that's their big question mark. Is who's their goaltending? I think is a big question mark.
I know, like maybe you're uncomfortable giving the reins to a freshman, but like I think McNaughton's the best goalie on the roster. But I think Wisconsin. You think about the forwards. I still think Caroline Harvey is the best player in the country. When she's healthy.
And like we had been debating this in the last couple of weeks, and I think me and Travis were both thinking that Ohio State has a slight edge. Now they swept Wisconsin earlier this year, but that was without Harvey, and which obviously is a big loss for them. We sort of said Wisconsin's the flashier, deeper offensive team. Ohio State's a little bit better structure and defensively. I think it's a real tight comparison. I would still favor Ohio State, but if you're going to take Wisconsin,
like I like this Ohio State team, and they were so mad about losing last year to a Wisconsin team that was worse than them that they said we're going to bring in every.
I was so waiting. I just wanted that Gopher Ohio State matchup in the final. I think I think a lot of people. I remember, for that. And just Wisconsin came in there and spoiled the whole
watching that game on my girlfriend's television. And the puck that banked, the Wethington shot that banked in off of Lamantia, and it's like, okay, they're bringing it to overtime. Anything can happen. I still didn't think they were a better. I thought they were a better team than Wisconsin, at that point, but they were not the better team that game.
Right.
If you ran a sandwich shop and you had a sandwich called the Healthy Harvey, What would you?
It was
what
a bid.
would you put on that sandwich?
This was a bid that we.
Well, I don't want to give too much praise to a Badger, except when she's wearing the Team USA colors. Yeah.
I was gonna put her before she got hurt. I was gonna put her as a Patty Kaz favorite. Yeah. Would you have who would you pick? Because she's been hurt she's back now, but I don't know if she's lost enough playing time that she's not exactly in that.
She'll get other chances to win the Patty Kaz.
Who else would you put in that mix
I
right
still
now?
think, the job that Abby Murphy has done carrying a team, that lost its play driver and Heisey and basically dragging the team to the top 5 spot they're in. I know that her play style does not win her any friends, but I think Murphy, and like, call me the biased gopher, whatever. I think, with Northeastern not being what they were, even though Gwyneth Phillips is still having a Gwyneth Phillips year, uh, I'd I'm on the Murphy train on this one. Although, will she get it? She antagonize people enough? Yeah.
That's actually a good argument that she doesn't have the kind of supporting cast
Yeah.
around her that she is needing to pull more of the weight for the
She
whole
got 21
team.
goals this year.
That's a good argument. Yeah. I got to imagine someone from Colgate's going to be
Yeah. I mean,
like a top three, either
Serdachny was
Serdachny.
top 3 last year, and Serdachny's like a good player, but Serdachny's a very good player, but they reward goal scorers over people with high assist totals.
You got that Colt Nikova
Yep.
too from them, who's had a really good career and another good year this year.
I like Kirsten Sims
so,
at
yeah.
Wisconsin. I think she's really become
Wisconsin's got
you have so
couple
many
of
players on
nominees.
Wisconsin. Yeah.
Right. And there's one too. You kind of got to look at those numbers. I mean, they had that 16-1 game against Lindenwood. Yeah. You got to take some of those numbers with the non-conference with a grain of salt. But still, they've got some. They'll have multiple top 10 nominees. Wisconsin will. Ohio State, I bet Gardner is going to get a top 10 as like a career nod, even if not maybe a top 3. So it's not like an open and shut case. It'll be a wide open race, I think. Similar to last year where they decided to go with Jakes, the defender. I don't know if they're going to do that 2 years in a row if they want to go with Harvey, who I still think pound for pound is the best player on the women's side. But I just don't know if she's got the resume this year with being out so much that she's.
Harvey has, what's she got, like 2 or 3 seasons left of eligibility? She'll get her chance.
Yeah, is it more sort of in the women's game where you're playing on sort of the Hobie rules traditionally, where you're going age and experience, and you're holding freshmen against them?
Daryl Watts did win as a freshman, but it's a little bit different in with the Hobie. It was goalies who were unable to win for a long time until McKay did, when McKay wasn't even the best goalie in the country that year. And in the Patty Cavs, it was defensemen until Jakes won it, which is funny because if you ask me, Jakes probably should have won it the year Heisey won it, and Heisey probably should have won it last year. They got the years reversed, but both.
It all evens out.
Yeah,
it evened out in a wash. Yeah, no, it's a good conversation, and maybe we'll end with some Big Ten men's side. Because, we're sort of NCHC centric. We do like to take a look at the other conferences, but we do focus on the Huskies and the NCHC. But Big Ten's always, uber competitive, and no exception this year. We've talked a little bit about the men's team in bits and pieces here throughout the show, but it seems like a year where, just watching from afar, catching some action here or there, team that kind of is struggling to finish in certain games, like no weekend so far this year where they've had 2 regulation wins. It's just the one weekend against St. Thomas where they swept, quote unquote, but one of those was in overtime. Lots of splits, lots of late game time goals allowed to bring games into overtime. Some game time goals for them that brought it to overtime as well, like that Michigan series. But kind of up and down. They've really not gone on a run yet. Obviously always a young team. Is it just kind of first half getting to know each other and getting some chemistry worked out? How do you see this Gopher team playing out the rest of the way?
People are going to talk about how they don't have Cooley or Nyes anymore. Obviously, those losses hurt, but the biggest loss was Faber. And
Yeah,
and
I
beyond
agree
that,
with that.
Lacombe, great defenseman, and Johnson probably would have been the best defender on this year's team, and he was the third best defender on last year's team. The big problem with Minnesota this year has been the defense. Like Kester was hurt to start the year, and really, Renzel has probably been their best defender as a freshman. And
Yeah, I was going to ask about him. He's been pretty impressive for you.
Renzel's like trying to catch up to where he's been, but like his offense is a lot better than I expected it to be. I think he's probably only going to be in college for 2 years. But you on top of everything, you can't just replace a Brock Faber, and that's for everything that Faber brings. And now the Wild fans all see it.
Yeah, I was really
Right.
impressed with how well he has been able to transition to the pro game. Like, it's just able to put Faber out in any position or any situation. It's been, I've always known that, throughout college that he was a solid player, but I didn't think that he'd be able to step in and look like a seasoned vet out there.
I did.
Like he was like a top 4 defenseman in the Wild's
Yeah,
playoff run last year.
He is my favorite. He is
Like
my
a month
favorite
after the
defenseman in my time
college
watching the
season.
Gophers. I
Yeah, he's really strong.
The team hasn't had a clean weekend yet. I think they're going to be an easy tournament team, but last year was the year. I don't think they are going to make the national championship game this time. Obviously, Minnesota is never out of it for too long, as long as they know what they're doing. But I think my point is that I've already bought concert tickets for the night of the national championship game.
College hockey's weird, man. Like St. Cloud gets back-to-back number 1 overall years, and they crap out against an Atlantic team, and then they make the title game with like their 12th best team ever.
Yeah.
In 21. So I mean,
and
lose
to
don't be
Greg
so
Carvel
shocked when they win it all.
But nobody in the Big Ten really strikes me as the level of Quinnipiac or BCBU or North Dakota. Like, I understand Wisconsin's had a great start under Mike Hastings, but we know how Mike Hastings teams get. Michigan State, they've had a great recovery under Nightingale. They haven't made the tournament yet, and I'm not sure I buy them as a deep run team on their first go round.
I just look at Michigan State and I just see their record and I see that I'm like, oh, this is a cute story. Like, it's like, I just don't take them serious. And maybe that's my fault and they should. But
like, I think when you get to like junior year Trey Augustine, they're going to be a problem. But
that's kind of what I said at the beginning of the year. They probably exceeded my expectations for this year, even though the record is, I think, a product of a weak non-conference schedule in part. But I've been impressed by them. I wouldn't be surprised if like they're the last standing Big Ten team.
Wouldn't be either. I just think they're like, I look at Quinnipiac, a team I have very easy access to, and I think, yeah, they lost some stuff. Yeah, they don't have a goalie as good as Yaniv Peretz, but they can repeat. They can definitely repeat. I look at, I don't fully trust BC because they're a little young, but Jacob Fowler can win them some games.
BC's like this year's Minnesota, kind of, where they're just very flashy, but these young teams just don't.
Well, I don't even think the Minnesota team last year was that young. I mean, maybe they're like a 22 Minnesota.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, BC's an exception. Like, I wouldn't even say Minnesota's was the youngest team, obviously, but
I think Michigan's a better example of a team that just is done in by youth.
Yeah, or Michigan's 22 team.
Yeah.
Even. Yeah,
I
we
think-
see
I
that
think
those
he's
kind of
good.
like the Big Ten. I'm not trying to rub it in. Big Ten is still not yet to win a national
Yeah.
title in their run as a hockey conference. And if you were going to make any bold takeaways from that, it is that yes, the youth of the high end prospects doesn't exactly translate.
I mean,
to
you need to balance
titles.
it, and I think the Minnesota team last year did a good job of balancing it. I think the Denver 22 team had a good balance of the young talent and the veteran guys. Like it's why I think BU is better off than BC right now for national.
I would agree
Even
with
if
that.
BC might have the best goalie in the country as a freshman, but BU has like the older guys who are still like key contributors.
God, do you remember when BC just had
So-
that terrible season? A terrible couple of seasons?
I had a couple
That
of
was
bad
great.
years. I mean, the year that I was in, it was the game that I met Dave Starman at. It was a 7-rip St. Cloud
Yeah.
win at BC. That was not a very good year for them. But yeah, some of those like national, like North Dakota went for a couple of years without going to the tournament. Like it's
Wish
a couple
they'd
of these
start that
big,
again.
Yeah, right? I wish that
it would be
keep
great.
going.
It was always those are always fun years. Yeah, you look at this top four. I mean, Quinnipiac, they've been there for so long. I guess we can call them a traditional power at this point. But BU, Maine, Boston College, North Dakota, and Wisconsin, Michigan State, you can go to the top 7 there. Like if we were looked at the top of the pairwise in 1997, we'd be nodding along and saying, "Yep,
Who
that's
the hell is
what it always is."
Quinnipiac?
But the story there.
What's
Than
in
Quinnipiac, but I'm saying the other teams, Maine's, it's been probably your entire lifetime, sentient lifetime that Maine's ever made a tournament. They used to be
like,
there.
I was 5 years old in 2002, so I don't remember that game. I've watched it,
right?
But I don't remember it.
Yeah, and as we mentioned, BU had some terrible years. I think the first Quinn year they won like 3 or 4 games. BC the last couple of York years.
Well, the Islanders,
Wisconsin. I mentioned the whole Granado run.
My girlfriend went to Northeastern, and her twin sister went to BC, and I have a few BC fan friends, so I have like an internal, not quite North Dakota feeling, but a North Dakota feeling about BU. So I don't want to see them do well, but I can admit when they're good.
Oh.
There's no comparison to North Dakota. You can't compare BU to North Dakota in any real sense, like from a school to school thing. North Dakota and their citizens are one in a million.
I understand.
They're very
I've
special.
just been really annoyed by BU people.
So, now the Maine Gophers, that was 0-2. That was Grant Patolni's game-winning goal.
Yep.
Who was it? University and No Hardware after that, or
yeah?
Oh,
yeah.
In 03.
Yep.
Right?
In 03.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Vanek year. Yeah.
Okay. And
that was one. I think that the Gophers tied it late, like an
they
extra
won in
attacker
overtime
goal,
against Michigan in the
overtime.
semi. But
I thought the title game.
I think they steamrolled.
Maybe
Maine.
Yeah.
No, well, the main game was overtime. I don't know if it was a late time.
Kowalska.
The UNH they steamrolled UNH.
Yep. Kowalska tied the game against Maine in the final minute.
Okay, that's what I thought. That was a good game.
I found
I do admit
a stock video site where I have been able to watch old NCAA tournament games. It's been a very fun watch.
Oh, nice.
I think I've stumbled upon that. Have you ever seen the 91
I just watched
national
that.
title game?
Man, what a game!
Great. My dad and my brother were at the game, and they still to this day say it's the best sporting event they've ever been to.
Both teams led by 3 goals at one point in that game, and then Scott Lachance.
Well, was it 3-0, 7-3, and then 7-7? Or was it 7-4?
BU scored 3 straight to tie the game. The diving one-hand poke by Scott Lachance to David Sacco ties it up.
And then Amani almost wins it at the end of regulation, too. He's got like a breakaway with 10 seconds left.
With 1 second left by the NMU goal. I watched that game a few months ago So I'm writing a piece on every NHL player from Connecticut. I'm doing like individual profiles,
wow.
and when I did the Scott LaChance piece, I watched that game, and I had so much fun watching that game. Yeah,
It's a classic.
I just don't understand how, like, hockey's just so bizarre where you can go score 14 goals in 3 periods and then just nothing for another 3.
well, see, what I found out,
Although, in fairness, those were
Those were
10-minute
10-minute
overtime
Okay, fair
periods,
that's
though.
right.
Okay,
And
That's like, oh,
those
okay,
but
had
still, but the overtime periods were quite dramatic too.
Yeah.
I mean, they had a lot of great. There might have
Keith
been a
Kachuk, I
post or
think, hit
two
2
hit.
posts.
and that was
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
were the clear boards, right?
Yep, very off-putting.
St. Paul Civic
Same
Center.
with 89, Minnesota Harvard game.
Another one where they hit
Yeah.
the post. Skarta, I think, in overtime. That was Woog's closest chance to win the title was that year, and they probably should have won that one. But
So,
I always,
going over the
At least
Gopher
I
jokes is always. I mean,
at least I can like look back, let's say at the Woog teams and say, well, I can watch this as a neutral fan. What loyalty do I have to a team that's wearing brown jerseys? Like, at least I can watch those games while I know what happens, and I don't feel any connection to like a Woog team. Like
they're kind of. I mean, watching them this year, Motzko must have been instrumental because they're kind of going to the throwback look with their uniforms. Like they got it looks like the shoulders have the white outline around the gold. It's a little different. It's kind of how they used to have it maybe 30 years ago. It looks a little bit retro, and I like it. And that's one. How do you think that they're transitioning to the smaller sheet? Is the shrunken Mariucci playing a factor?
I don't think so, because like all these guys are coming through juniors and like the NTDP or junior teams anyway. Like these guys have been playing on small sheets their entire life. It's a transition going to the big ice rather than the other way around.
Right.
I think the issue is
well,
like the defense is young, and outside of like Kester, and there's just no real there's no Brock Faber on that defense.
sure.
Well, they got plenty of experience in
Yeah.
goaltender.
I mean,
Do you still
Yep.
like him close at 25
Yeah.
years old?
no, I mean close to my age, so I mean
There you
I
go. It's,
think
nice. You can
I
relate.
think in Justin Close's case, as much as you can root for any Gopher, he's one whose story is a good one, because it's so unlike anything Big Ten, in that he comes in as a
Right.
third goalie out of the Saskatchewan League. Basically, when Jared Moe transfers, he becomes the backup. He doesn't get into a game until LaFontaine leaves mid-season, and he comes in, and he's also like the smallest starter in college hockey, and he does pretty well. I think I've had no problems with Justin Close, especially given there's no Devin Levi or Yaniv Peretz in the NCAA this year, so Close is not only not an issue, he's someone I feel comfortable in. Wish I felt the same about the defense.
So you're saying Gophers are going to make the
Yes,
tournament?
yes, I am.
And similar to how we did the WCHA, the women's side, we got Wisconsin, Michigan State, and Minnesota in pairwise position now. You got Michigan right outside the fringe. They're at 15. We can't count them because there's 2 auto bid leagues right now. So as of today, they got 3 teams in the field. More or less the same. At the end of the organization, 3 teams, and you think of those 3 teams?
I think Michigan just doesn't really know where it is right now, and their goaltending is a mess. I guess it's a shame.
Don't tell that to St. Cloud after he shut out the Huskies.
I mean, it's a shame for Michigan
Barczewski.
because like McGroarty's gone after this year, I'm sure.
Well, they'll have next year's McGroarty come in.
Yeah,
probably 3 of them. They
can rotate
of that skill level.
Maybe Michigan makes it at the end, but I'd say it's 3 or 4. I just.
They're certainly the only other. Like, you don't think anything about Penn State.
I mean, Notre Dame is the
Ohio
goaltending where they
State.
can win the Big Ten tournament.
Yeah.
So I'd watch for Notre Dame. Man, if you think Minnesota is going to look different with Close, imagine how Notre Dame's going to look without Bishop. But
yeah, he's kind of propping them up single-handedly.
I don't think Notre Dame.
Has been
I don't
last
think
couple
Notre
of
Dame's
years.
a very good team outside of him. So I'm going to say they're on the outside.
Yeah, and they, again, talking about like Boston College, knowing that they got a bunch of guys at World Juniors. Last year we saw the Gophers do the St. Cloud series, Saturday, Sunday series, right after, and all of their guys like Sungarud and Cooley played that series.
Yeah.
I don't think they took a game off. Well, I see if CHN's app is to be believed, which isn't 100% accurate, they're actually doing a Sunday-Monday series with CC. Is that correct? Because that's...
I guess
Be
so.
careful, Woden's listening. So...
Well, you know why that is. Bob really just wants those guys coming back with full strength. He probably did that because they got the transatlantic flight. So he's got to add another day to the schedule.
Yeah, well, I think you know how Bob operates by this point.
Oh, we know.
Oh, we're well aware of Bob's
the fact
ticks.
that the Olympians came back for the Penn State game after the Olympics ended, and the stories about the connecting flights that Faber and Nyes and Myers had to take.
That's right.
I think. If anything, Bob's just going to say, they did it, you do it.
Does throw them off their rhythm, though. And
Bob loves
will
the
tell
schedule.
You about how that really
loves everything.
Don't get him started about 8 p.m. games in the NCAA tournament either. So we like to have fun with him. He used to be ours. He dumped us.
Just answer questions about Air Force.
Now.
That's all I want. I want closure on Air Force.
One thing I want to say is, since then, the only coach who has really left one program for another is Hastings. You see football coaches leave for X program all the time, and this happens in basketball. And in hockey, coaches, all the marquee programs take the path of least resistance. Ex-alum, usually younger.
Or assistant coach getting promoted up to, like Raboyne,
right,
getting Augustana, or I mean, you could even say like Nick Oliver, to a lesser extent, going from the U to assistant at Wisconsin.
Yeah, I mean,
I guess
I think about how BU, BC, Michigan State, Michigan was a little different situation, but all in the same summer. All of them had a coaching vacancy, and think about all the people who want the jobs at those programs, and each of them went chalk.
And each of them had Mike Hastings rumors too.
Maybe not Michigan, but yeah,
at least Michigan State and BU did.
BC had
I know BU may have. BC had Kavanaugh rumors too, right? Because he was York's long-term assistant. But
Kavanaugh turned that down very early in the process, and Lehman, I think, was taken out of the running late. I think it was Craig Janney who tweeted, I think Nate Lehman's a good coach, but we need a BC guy coaching us and whatever.
So maybe it's just
a St. Cloud
alum thing where you're, Botsko, St. Cloud, Hastings went to St. Cloud. They're the ones that'll go ahead and switch.
Yeah.
I think they lead the country in schools that have produced D1 head coaches because they got 3 of them right now with Mount.
That's a good question. I'm going to have to look that up. Not right now, but I'm going to have to.
I think there's schools that have 2. I'm not sure if there's 3, but none of them, incidentally, coach for St. Cloud. So we can't even keep on.
Yeah, we've got a
Duluth
coach for crying out loud.
Right. And Duluth's got a North Dakota alum. It's all sort of screwed up and backwards a little bit, but That is a good point, that you don't see this sort of poaching of other coaches with programs, because it does tend to stay, as we said, either alums
Former
or
assistants,
just
yeah.
promoting assistants. Yeah.
I
Very
got
interesting.
as we've already got through questions and this podcast, since we're going on 2 hours, so we might as well wrap it up. I do have one question about a future Husky that did play in the for the national development team, who's having a really solid year at the USHL so far. That's Austin Bernovic. Just kind of in your thoughts and opinions maybe of him as his time playing in the national development team. That's not a place St. Cloud gets players, so
Right.
so that was kind of a surprise. Obviously big guy, but from all accounts it seemed like he had maybe a little bit of a disappointing national development team, and just to see him kind of explode, like is it a different play style, is it like different play, like what do you think contributes to that?
Look, everyone wants to play for the NTDP at this point, but it's not for everybody. And if you're a lower line guy, like the one thing about the NTDP is I think they have a goal to get everyone to college right afterward, and that's just not the right path for some people. Minnesota is a recruit Beckett Hendrickson who was like this. I think in Bernovic's case, it was a more extreme example because he didn't even make the U18 IAHF championship team this past year. So I don't think going into St. Cloud would have been the right option at all. And sometimes you need to get some confidence by going to a different USHL team and ripping it up. And I think the one guy I think of for this who kind of was buried in the lineup with the NTDP was Sean Farrell at Harvard, who was he was on that NTDP team with Hughes and Zegras and Boldy and Caulfield.
Yeah.
And, he was a smaller guy, and I think because of Harvard going out for COVID, he actually took 2 years in the USHL where he was like the leading scorer in the league. And, he became a really good college player, an Olympian, and now a guy who's made his NHL debut and someone the Canadians have high hopes for. And obviously, Bernovic's a different type of player, being, the power forward guy. But, consider this from someone who rooted for a Don Lucia coach team for so many years.
Sorry about that.
Sometimes, and Lucia didn't realize this, you have the extra years to take before going to college. Use them.
Sure.
And it works for many of those players. I don't know what Bernovic's long-term future is, but he's certain. I think him being in the USHL this year was a no-brainer.
Stock rising for draft.
Maybe
like next year's U20s.
Maybe
outside shot of that.
I mean, obviously USA Hockey's familiar with him from having been with the NTDP. That was a smaller age group outside of guys like Danny Nelson. So maybe if they need some meet up the middle, they'll look his way if he has a good start to his year at St. Cloud. I don't think he made the Junior A Challenge roster, did he?
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
I mean, maybe. We'll see.
You could always use some meet up the middle. That's what I say.
That's also on the Healthy Harvey. So the
right on top of the alfalfa sprouts.
Exactly.
Jake has no idea what we're talking about.
I unfortunately am not a regular listener to your podcast. But,
that's okay. No one is.
We
have Dan Jacobson and my wife
are
the two regular listeners.
Yeah,
we'll go Huskies Woo.
Yeah, well, hi to everybody who wondered how I got on the show.
Yeah,
this was great. If I don't say so myself, maybe we should have you on again. Especially, I enjoyed the women's talk as well. Maybe we should have them preview the women's tournament or something.
Perfect. Sounds good. Well, Jake, thanks for taking the time. You can, if you want to plug your Twitter right now, go right ahead.
And your podcast. Tell me about your podcast.
This year I've started a podcast called Off the Island. I'm not sure your overlap with Islanders fans is that much. Me and another guy who is not from Long Island, we talk about the Islanders. We just recorded earlier today. I'm also a broadcaster for the Danbury Hat-Tricks of the North American Hockey League. So I get to see some good players in the NAL. I'm really trying to build my name in broadcasting, but I just love talking hockey. Follow me on Twitter at Jake Baskin PXP. Jake, spelled normally, Baskin like Carol Baskin or Baskin Robbins, whatever have you. Yeah, you can call.
I'm gonna say we need Tony Robbins on here, so we really have the Baskin Robbins podcast. But you stole my joke.
Well, I've been getting that or Carol Baskin for the last 3 years, so.
Well, until next time, go Huskies.